I heard it once said that the most important way to love your kids is by loving their mom. So today on Dad to Dad, I've got my baby mama, Kirsten Roquemore, here.
Actually, he's my baby daddy.
Some of the people I most respect, the strength of the family and the stability for the kids definitely came in large part due to the power of the relationship. So I thought it was appropriate to bring on my beautiful wife of 32 years and mother of my 6 incredible children. I couldn't be doing Dad to Dad without the founder of the feast, so to speak, my wife, Kirsten. And her, by the way, 6 kids in 8 years this woman has put out. Every one of them beautiful, intelligent, world-changing kids. And I couldn't have made a better choice in terms of the woman who would be influencing my kids every single day of their life. So I was able to contact each of them and ask them some questions about what was the most important things in our relationship as they were growing up and kids. And we got some great responses, as well as I got a few responses from some friends and family about some of the things that they think were important about it. So I just thought we'd touch on a few of those, and looking forward to hearing my wife's opinion on that as well. One of the big one that came up twice was healthy conflict resolution. That one of the more important ways that in a home that when our kids see us work through problems, and my wife and I had plenty of problems in the early years.
Yes, we did.
We're both firstborns, and both very strongly opinionated,
Yep.
and both leaders in our own right. And so there were times when those strong opinions kind of met force, and we had to learn how to work through that. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, our kids in the early years, Bethany and Jordan, sorry you had to watch us figure this all out. But we got better with each passing year.
Yep.
And so I was thinking about moments when maybe they would hear us go, no, you don't make the food that way, you make it this way, or we're not going to turn right, we're going to turn left, or the lyrics to that song weren't that, they were actually this, and all the silly things that we argued about.
We did have a lot of silly arguments about things. But I feel like also that our kids had an opportunity to watch us resolve and work through those things, forgive each other, and come to a point of coming back together again.
Yeah.
So
they got to hear us say, okay, I'm sorry, I screwed up, I shouldn't have made such a big deal on what the lyrics to the Michael, what's his last name song?
Guilty feet have got no rhythm.
You know the song where the lyrics are,
I was sure it was Guilty Feeling.
I'm Never Gonna Dance Again by George Michael.
And Steve was like, no, it's Guilty Feet.
Have
and
no
I was
rhythm.
like, no, it's not. Well, sure enough, Steve was right.
We were actually out with another couple, and they all agreed with Kirsten. It's guilty feelings,
Yeah.
Steve, not guilty feet. And I was like, no, it's guilty feet. Have got no rhythm. I'm never going to dance again. See, it's feet, dance. No,
Yeah.
Steve, that's... Anyway, we went way overboard arguing about that ridiculous. Now, those of you who've been married a while could probably relate to the silliness of arguing about something as dumb as the lyrics in a song. Mm-hmm. But we did, and back then you didn't have your smartphone to quickly look it up and decide who was right.
True.
So we actually left that engagement thinking I was the stupid one, thinking it was the lyrics.
So we had to go back to our desktop computer at home and find out that Steve actually was right about that.
And honestly, I wish I could tell you that I was right most of the time, but I've discovered that most of the occasions where we argue, usually my wife was actually right. So I've learned this great phrase, and this is one of the things I've learned, was to say, instead of arguing, I would go, you may be right. Mm-hmm. And my wife also uses that regularly now. Instead of arguing about it, it's better to just, say, and our kids seeing us look. And then on those occasions where one or the other of us went crazy and went overboard and even got angry at the other person, maybe even shouted, there were more than one occasion where one of us would come back in front of all of those that we made a big deal out of something on, mm-hmm. and say, I'm really sorry. I
Right.
went
Or
nuts right there.
like, okay, kids, I was wrong for talking to Dad that way, or for we were wrong to have to argue like that. And
Yeah.
I think that goes a long way in helping kids feel secure, and that you're not just letting things kind of bubble under the surface, that you resolve things and come back to a point of unity.
Right. That they see that even when things were heated, they were on occasion, that we always took each other, we always came back together. We always forgave each other. We always worked through it, and always admitted that Kirsten was right most of the time. One of the big ones that came out too was stability. That just in general, our kids said they felt more stable when they knew the strength of our relationship. That they didn't have to wonder, am I going to come home to my parents, on the brink? That we loved each other. In fact, one of the things that even came out was showing affection. And funny, because usually, and you guys have probably experienced this, when we do something like kiss or hold hands or whatever, and a lot of times our kids would be like, ooh, yuck. But later they'll admit that when we showed physical affection, and my wife and I generally, if we're sitting somewhere or we're walking, we're holding hands or we're connecting, there's a physical affection and showing, and even saying things like, I love you, and wow, you hot young thing, and making funny jokes, that they might roll their eyes, but deep inside, they were glad that we loved each other, that we were
And your
attracted.
parents, I feel like your parents really set that example for you.
They did.
Growing up. They were probably always embarrassing you with how affectionate they were, and so that
My dad would not leave my mom alone. He chased her around the house and constantly talked in front of us about what a blessed man he was and marrying such a sexy woman. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, Dad. We want to think about our mom that way. But deep inside, I never doubted that my mom and dad loved each other. And it made me feel more secure. And they were married till the day my dad died, 40 years. And so we tried to model that as well, that even when they say yuck, we know that deep inside, I think it touches something inside them.
I have to say, like, for me too, a really big piece of feeling loved by you was that you really supported me in my dreams and goals. It wasn't just taking care of the house or the kids, that in my acting goals or just whatever, that you were always very much on board and supportive of those things, and modeled that for our kids, so that they saw that you supported me. And I think that's hugely important for kids to see that there's a mutual support going on between.
And vice versa. My wife, one of my burdens has been exactly what we're doing here, about the importance of fathers in the home. And when I've wanted to either speak or write or do a vlog and take up my wife's kitchen to do that, she has been very supportive and even encouraging, and even double checking and saying, hey, did you get that done? I know how important it is to you. Because my wife is very administrative. That's not one of my gifts. I tend to be a little bit more of a visionary and thinking about the future. But as you realize, any strength of any relationship is you need somebody who dreams about the next big step and helps the other one to be willing to take that step. But then once you make that big step, somebody better be able to manage the result of that big step. And so I think we've been a good balance there. And so my wife has supported me as well in our dreams. And we actually, with 6 kids, just one example, we actually left a place in the Northwest in Oregon where we lived and moved all the way to Texas in the summer, no less, to support one of my visions of being able to work more in a role of reaching out to young people. And she stood behind me during that big move. And then the next move, I think, was more the other way around. We moved from Texas to California, so that my wife had always wanted an opportunity to pursue her desire to act. And so we moved here. And I think one of the things that we heard from our kids was that meant a lot to them to see us being willing to sacrifice for the other person and show love.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases it's even more important, if I'm to say it, for men to do that for women, because I think in general there's this perception that we still haven't overcome, probably a generally sexist idea that women are going to be more in the supportive role at home and support their man's dreams. And I think one of the things we wanted to talk about was that especially when a woman is carrying the baby, nursing, caring for them young in their house, in some ways she can feel like her dreams are lost. And if anything, I think it's more important that a dad is constantly checking in and saying, how are you doing? And what would you like to do? And giving, as our kids got older, there were times when Kirsten wanted to be in a local play, for instance, local production, and tried to always make room and time for her to be able to pursue that.
So one of the big things, though, when my kids were very small, and we had several of them, so it was a lot, was when Steve would get home from work, was I would go grocery shopping by myself without children. And that was kind of like, I remember it just being like a woo, exciting adventure. Because I had a break from little people for a couple hours, and so that was awesome too. Like, it seems like a small thing, but when you're home with babies and toddlers all day long, just getting a couple hours to yourself, just to grocery shop.
I don't quite know it was such a big deal, because it wasn't like the kids ever asked for things when you took them to the grocery store, right? They weren't like, Mom, can we have that? Or can we get this? Right? And obviously that's a joke, that when you go take young kids to the grocery store, they want everything, and sometimes they grab everything, and it takes probably twice as long to actually grocery shop. So anyway, that was a good example.
Okay, no banging the table.
No my wife has been reminding me that when I do these vlogs,
this kind of picks up
that I tend to do this a lot when I'm making a point, and she's going to, if you see her gently tap my hand, you'll know why.
In a non-parental way.
In a non-parental way, exactly.
That's a big one, is in any marriage, and so hence in parenting your children, you are supposed to parent your children, but not your spouse.
Absolutely.
That was a huge thing that came up in counseling for us about 10 years into our marriage. We got some amazing counseling. And that was one of the things we realized that we both did to each other in various ways, was parented each other.
Yes.
And nobody wants to be married to their
that's actually,
mom or dad.
We didn't have that down on our paper, but that's actually, I would say, one of the bigger things that we showed is showing respect one for another, and not trying to, and it can be just the smallest things like, Kirsten, didn't you want to try to go for a walk every single night at this time of day? Or don't you think you're drinking a little too much coffee? Or maybe from her to me, it could be,
watching too much TV.
Oh, yes. How much TV have you watched today, honey? And the point our counselor actually made, which I thought was a good one, is that nobody wants to go to bed with their mom or dad. And that it robs affection.
Unless you got issues.
Unless you've got issues, that's right. Then that's a whole nother issue. That would be another vlog.
That would be a whole nother topic for someone else to talk about.
Absolutely. In terms of just the stability that they felt at home, that they trusted that I was going to talk to you, that you were going to talk to me, that things weren't going to just be left in a bad place. So as you might know, with 6 kids or with families, there are times when literally she's on her way out the door, or I'm on my way out the door, and there was one last mean thing said, many times because the kids are everywhere, within hearing of the kids. Like, well, why don't you work on that? Or why isn't this still undone? Will you get this thing done? And say, well, why don't you mind your own? And something mean was said. I think it was important that they knew that usually when I'm on my way out, I would get a text or a note from Kirsten saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, or vice versa. I'm calling to say, you know what, I said this and I was wrong. And them hearing us work through that.
Well, honestly, I think if a couple does not work through things on a regular basis, that's where you get in trouble, because it becomes kind of like the iceberg under the surface of the water, and that iceberg keeps growing and growing even if you can't see it. And so that's when you hear about people that have been married 20 years and they're getting a divorce, and people are like, what? I'm shocked. Like, they seem so happy. And it's because they were never dealing with conflict. They were just kind of sweeping it under the rug, letting it be that hidden iceberg, And you can't do that and successfully maintain a marriage or really successfully model a marriage to your children.
So true.
If you have hit that point in your marriage where you've gone through a divorce and now you're trying to parent children as a divorced family, there are good ways and bad ways to do that. And I come from a divorced home. My parents divorced when I was 6, and there were a lot of really hard, crappy things that my brothers and I had to go through as a result of that. Divorce is always damaging to kids. Even if it's not a healthy marriage, it's still damaging to children. But there are ways that you can manage it that make it better. And my parents, one thing I will say about them is that they had an amicable divorce. So they never took out their frustrations with each other on us. They were always positive. They communicated with each other about the needs that we had. They shared custody. They really did a good job, I felt.
They did.
With making a bad situation as good as it could be. So I would just say, if you are in a divorce situation, don't use your kids as, a wall between you or as weapons in your warfare. Love your kids enough to be civil to your spouse and to do the best to work with them.
Yeah, no, I remember your mom and dad, even when I was new to, our relationship was new, I was always amazed at how I never heard a negative word from either one of them toward the other, even though I knew there were some hard things about that divorce, and how much easier it made for you and your brothers to be able to move forward. And because at least you didn't have to deal with that. It was hard enough that your parents were separated and divorced, but that you didn't have to deal with them backbiting one another. So I think no matter who the mom of your kids are, loving your wife regardless of that relationship is critical.
Yeah.
Knowing that
even if there's a divorce, that you still act lovingly towards your wife, your ex-wife.
Yeah, when you're picking up the kids, obviously, for the weekend or vice versa, vacations, that they see that you can still be kind to one another, encouraging, not looking for opportunities to say mean things about the other. I think that's really important. So one other thing I wanted to cover was at home, when you have kids, there's always places where I think they're looking for an opportunity to work between you. And I think one of the things that we really worked hard at, and for the most part I think we did a pretty good job on, was having a united front.
Yes.
So that, for instance, if one of the kids says, "Hey Dad, can I go out to this party tonight?" And maybe I feel pretty good about the party, but I'm not sure how my wife feels. My standard response to a question was like, "Tell you what, let me talk to your mom and I'll get back to you." I usually would never respond to something like that without first discussing with Kirsten. And Kirsten was the same way, that they couldn't find a way to wriggle between us and say, "Well, Mom said I could do this," or "Dad said I could do this." That I think one of the ways that we show love is by respecting the fact that my wife might have a different opinion on that, and that you and I needed to be in agreement. That issues like dating. Maybe there's a new person that either our boys or our girls are interested in, and I might think, "Oh, they're okay," but my wife would be, "You know what? I've got some reservations about that person or that situation." And so it was really important, and I think you were great at not telling the kids something without calling me first or vice versa to check in and say, "Hey, is this going to work?" Can you think of examples?
Well, and I think about times where the kids would say, "Mom, can we blah, blah, blah," or "Dad, can we blah, blah, blah," and we would be, "What did your dad say?" Or "What did your mom say?" And they said, "He said we couldn't," or "She said we couldn't," and then we're like, "Well, you have your answer then." And so, especially on things that, aren't huge monumental things like the age you start dating. But when it was smaller things, and so we just really did that. We would never side with our children against each other.
That's right.
And
even when I think we thought maybe the other person was wrong.
Exactly.
Our
We
kids
would never do it in front of the kids.
That's right.
We would take our discussion to the bedroom to have a private discussion between us,
Right.
and then come back to the kids with our united answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, just as an example, I can think of times where my kids would even come, and probably Kirsten got this too, and say, Dad, earlier today I talked to Mom about this particular issue and she said this and then she said that. And then she might have even gotten kind of heated and said it in a loud voice. Now, there might have even been something inside me thinking, sounds like my wife is having a bad day. And maybe even thinking, that wasn't so great, Kirsten.
I never had bad days.
But my wife never. So that was my wrong first thought. No, so if I thought that, usually my response to my kids would be something along these lines, without even keeping the poker face, would be like, well, what did you say to her? And were you respectful when you asked that question? Tell me how you asked. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll talk to Mom, but for now, her response to you stands. And it does make me wonder if you approached her in a wrong way. And I will talk with Mom and we'll discuss it and we'll let you know. And so that's the way it would go most of the time or there were days where maybe I was exhausted and I came home and one of my kids wanted to talk and I responded harshly. Mm-hmm. And my wife would never embarrass me in front of the kids. She'd pull me aside and say, honey, you were kind of hard on the boys right there when they asked, they were trying to talk to you and you just totally missed it. And I was like,
and you were always so good about, then apologizing if that were the situation, apologizing to the kids. So.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I think once again this whole idea of being one, that our kids saw us as a single unit,
yes.
that they couldn't go to one or the other.
Right. And I think honestly, that gives kids such a sense of security. They don't want to be the ones steering the ship.
That's right.
They really don't. I mean, they may be, like some of our kids more than others were very much strong-willed and had opinions about things, and we've always encouraged our kids to be, think for themselves and all that. But no child wants to be the one with the final say. Honestly, that's not in their heart of hearts. That's not what they want. It creates insecurity in kids. So I think we did a pretty good job of creating that boundary for our kids.
Yeah.
Like still encouraging them to have an opinion and to think for themselves, but also giving them those healthy boundaries. And I've heard it compared to a river. So a river can be strong and fierce, but it's got banks that keep it in check. And if you didn't have the banks, the boundaries of the river, you would have a swamp.
Yeah.
You would have stagnant, yucky, whereas a river with boundaries can be thriving and productive. And I feel like that's a good analogy for parenting.
Some of the people who listen aren't people that are necessarily married yet and are watching because someday in the future they hope to be. And I would say now to all those young men, particularly, I'm going to address you, that when you're thinking about the woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with, obviously what first attracted me to my wife was her stunning looks. I must admit, it wasn't her incredible wisdom. But when I finally chose my wife, part of why I chose Kirsten was she was an exceptional woman. And she's proven that through the years of thinking about that this is the woman who's now daily the example to my kids. With wisdom, with fairness, with the way she's handled things, the way she supported me, the way she's loved me and loved them both. And I want to encourage the guys to think that when you're choosing a wife, not only someone who sure looks good every morning when you wake up, which I got the best of both worlds, but also that is going to be a great example to your kids and is going to be a great co-leader along with them, that you're choosing the person that's going to be the single most important female role model in their lives.
However, I will say that that doesn't mean the woman you pick is perfect or is going to be perfect. Like, I feel like I made a lot of mistakes as a mom and a wife and grew in grace over time. Like, I feel like there were things that I overcame, things that I got better at. And so it doesn't mean that the person that you're in choosing a spouse, that the person has to have everything together and be perfect in every way.
That's one of the great things about having a team, is that I always felt like my wife was cheering for me and pulling for me to be the best possible father and husband, and was on my team, and never going behind my back or subverting that in any way. And I tried to do the same for her. And so when you've got that kind of support and love, I think then it just builds an even stronger foundation for the kids for the future. Mm-hmm. And so I am so thankful that I got to do fathering, do life, do marriage with you. I made a great choice there. Thanks so much for being my guest on this edition.
You're so welcome.
Love you.
I love you.
With that, I want to say that the difference a father can make in one child's life can change the world.
Like and subscribe.